We are live from Hillsborough Community College in Ybor City. I'm Veronica Cintron. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our town hall, Silent No More Harassment in the Workplace. I want to reintroduce our panel of guests tonight talking about this issue. Sierra Bender, a renowned women's rights advocate and empowerment speaker. We have attorney Jim Thompson and the owner and president of Liberty Partners, a lobbyist in Tallahassee with a tremendous amount of experience, Jennifer Green. Thank you for joining us for this segment. We told you before the break, we explored the Me Too movement, how it's gained so much steam just in the last couple of months, and how it's given more people, more women, even men, the opportunity to feel more courage and speak out and seek justice when it comes to reporting sexual harassment. I want to show you now some new statistics about retaliation concerns. It gives us some more perspective about why some people who are subjected to sexual harassment are not comfortable speaking out. A poll conducted by aware.org found out of 500 employees across 92 companies, 12% of workers say they've received threats of being fired if they did not comply with the requests made by their harassers. The survey, including both men and women, of course, and it's important to note that this is an issue, the fears of retaliation, all of that, not only affecting private business, but also public office. Here's how Tallahassee and Washington are responding. Amid a steady stream of business suits, congressional bills, and bailouts, when it comes to high-profile sex assault allegations on Capitol Hill, for many victims, it can feel like seeking justice is an uphill battle.
I'd say for decades, harassment was just part of the job.
And because of current policies, it could stay that way. Do you know what it takes to file a sexual harassment claim on Capitol Hill? There is no internal HR department. The victim must reach out to the Office of Compliance to undergo 30 days of mandatory counseling before filing a grievance against their harasser. They can then choose to go into mediation with the person they've lodged a complaint against for at least 30 days. When that period is over, the victim must wait an additional 30 days, but not more than 90 to officially file a formal complaint. They can then pursue a hearing with either the Office of Compliance or the Federal District Court, but not both. This daunting, ineffective process is why some leaders in Washington are pushing to make major policy changes.
We are going to change the culture, not just here in Congress, not just in Hollywood, but across the land. Every worker should have a respectful workplace.
In the House, Speaker Paul Ryan addressed the issue, calling it a disgrace. On November 14, 2017, Speaker Ryan announced mandatory anti-harassment and discrimination training for all House members and staff.
It is time to raise the bar in Tallahassee.
Here in Florida, we've seen our own politicians get burned in a sexual assault allegation firestorm.
There is a sexual harassment epidemic across state government. And to restore public confidence, we need a statewide effort spearheaded from the very top.
Despite ongoing efforts to right decades worth of wrongs, ousted Senator Al Franken, who apologized for his own inappropriate behavior, made a valid point.
There is some irony in the fact that I am leaving while a man who has bragged on tape about his history of sexual assault sits in the Oval Office.
He's referring to that infamous 2005 Access Hollywood tape in which now President Donald Trump could be heard bragging to TV host Billy Bush about trying to have sex with a married woman. Since taking over the White House, at least 19 women accused President Trump of sexual misconduct, allegations he has vehemently denied.
Every woman lied when they came forward to hurt my campaign. Total fabrication. The events never happened, never.
So why is justice often so hard to find within facilities where it's supposed to be served? So no doubt, sexual harassment allegations have shaken up our nation's capital and our state capital. And if somebody's had a front row seat to what's developed, at least for us in Tallahassee, is you, Jennifer, with your 20 years plus experience as a lobbyist and in state politics. How would you say that this new environment is changing the way our state government operates?
Well, Veronica, it's odd. We're greeting each other and not really sure how to, whether it's shaking a hand or it's a hug for someone that you've known for many, many years. It's just this walking on eggshells, and I think it's unfortunate because it's individuals who typically are not the ones that we're concerned about, that are probably not doing anything wrong and aren't exhibiting any bad behavior. But it's a new reality.
So you're thinking, in your experience, the good guys out there are also paying a price through this process. In what ways?
Absolutely, and the good gals. Being a female in the legislative process, I don't want to be considered a female. I want to be considered just a good lobbyist. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female. But now there's a situation where you've got legislators who are male who have concerns about having closed-door meetings when normally it wouldn't be an issue. We're talking about an issue related to a public policy issue, perhaps a client's in the room or not in the room, but just the perception of what's somebody going to say outside the door. And it's not that the two people that are in the room have a concern about each other. It's the perception of whether or not something is going to come up with someone else, a third party, making an accusation.
Let me ask you, watching this firsthand, how does it affect you as a woman in a male-dominated environment in Tallahassee doing business?
Well, I think it's more so going to affect the women that come behind me. We've got a lot of young women that are in college that are going to make very good folks in the political process, and they're going to have to be thinking about things like, what are they wearing to the Capitol? How are they projecting themselves at the Capitol? And candidly, just being very comfortable and pushing back on a situation where they're uncomfortable. And I think that's probably what's the most unfortunate thing is not talking about the one scenario that does happen. There's all these scenarios that don't. And so how can you conduct yourself in a business environment and have it be a positive experience?
The legislative session started this week. What's the talk like around the halls of the state capitol?
The tone is pretty uncomfortable. I've been lobbying 23 years, and it's no one's really sure what to say or what to do. And I think it's more so because the reality is not what we're seeing on TV. Obviously one instance of sexual harassment is one too many. But there are situations of consensual relationships, there are false accusations, there's a whole host of things that can be happening. And I think everyone right now is concerned about what's the perception of the public in general. Perception of the political world is not really positive, and this just piles on. And it's unfortunate because there's some really, really good public servants who probably aren't going to stay in office, or folks out there who are going to decide not to run because they don't want to be subject to that.
So tell me maybe about what some of the things you're hearing from your male colleagues in Tallahassee about this and how it's affecting them. What's the male perspective in politics right now?
Well, having 3 older brothers, I've always been the kid sister and the one who hung out with a lot of guys, and I still have a lot of male friends, both legislators, staff, and other lobbyists. And I think there's a sense of concern for other female lobbyists that they're going to be treated differently. I think there's some that will probably take advantage of that. We're all in competition for a similar pool of clients, and I can see a scenario which there might be a situation where an individual says, well, you might want to not hire a female, whether it's a staffer or a lobbyist. That certainly could come up. But I think for the most part, it's been pretty positive. I mean, we've joked a little about this is a really odd situation to be in. We're in the South. We typically hug as a welcome gesture, and it's you're wondering whether or not you should continue to do that. And it's not so much the two people that are in the discussion, it's what's the person outside the discussion going to look at.
Right, and talking about the male perspective, and I know, Jim, you represent obviously both employers as well as people who have felt they're the target of sexual harassment. What are you hearing from the people you're representing?
Well, some people are uncomfortable in the workplace now. They feel as though they have to walk on eggshells. They feel as though they can't just be friendly. And basically what I tell anyone who's worried about that is that's not a worry. You shouldn't change your behavior if that's what your behavior is. Change your behavior if you're a Harvey Weinstein, or that type of, if you're a predator. That's absolutely unacceptable. But going into work, saying, how are you doing this morning? I like your outfit.
Nice haircut.
Nice haircut. Any of that is perfectly acceptable. I mean, you start doing it all the time and you're basically stalking somebody doing it, you're probably crossing the line.
But the key is in how it's being received, right? It's how the person receiving maybe the compliment, if that person is not comfortable with maybe how you said it, how you looked at that person when you said it, I mean, that's where it becomes grayer of an issue.
And that's what's happened recently with the whole Me Too movement is now all of a sudden I'm seeing that people who are uncomfortable with somebody who's giving what they're considered just compliments, they're a little less reluctant now to go up and say, please don't do this.
Right.
Or at least go to their supervisor and say, I don't like it when Andy does this,
right,
or when John does this. Could you please talk to him?
All right, we do have some audience questions right now for that. Lori Davison, please go ahead.
That's right, Veronica. And we got a lot of these via social media, so this is another one a lot of people are talking about. Can you guys talk about due process? It seems like in some cases the presumption of guilt is enough for serious consequences.
Yeah, and unfortunately that's exactly the case. I have people call me up where they say, look, I'm about to be fired, or I've been fired because I was wrongfully accused of sexual harassment, and I can't help them. You're protected if you go forward and you make a complaint of sexual harassment. But there is no law in Florida that protects you when you're on the receiving end of that complaint. And I feel terrible for those people, but there's not much from a legal standpoint that I can do for them. The state is at-will employment, meaning you could be fired for any reason or no reason at all, unless there's a legal avenue that you can pursue. And that legal avenue, when you make a complaint of sexual harassment, is going to be that's protected. There are other protections, race, religion, national
right,
origin, but being accused of sexual harassment, there is no protection for you.
And Jennifer, in your experience, based on what you're seeing in Tallahassee and our state capital, due process, I'm sure it's something that, considering the recent scandals we've seen coming out of Tallahassee, people are nervous about. Will I get due process?
Due process is, in the political world, is really up to the voters. There are folks that are certainly have been in the newspapers and have been in news stories, and just the perception of the name being mentioned is going to affect that person going back home.
And likely end your career in many cases.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and that's the unfortunate part. Again, you've got individuals that are public servants, and they're certainly in a high bright light, but then they also have the ability to really focus on what they're doing, and perhaps even try to help with some of the behavior that is inappropriate. And it doesn't have to be just sexual harassment. Any behavior that's making someone uncomfortable really needs to stop. And hopefully in our state capital that the rest of the state doesn't think that we're this sinful, horrible place. A lot of good things go on in the Capitol.
Do you feel that lawmakers who or colleagues know may already have a reputation of inappropriate behavior in Tallahassee are maybe straightening out after all of this that they're seeing?
I think anyone who folks are chattering about should be worried, or anyone who has done something inappropriate should be worried, and hopefully their behavior will change immediately. Again, whether they did it once.
A sobering experience,
yes,
right? Yes,
absolutely.
Right, we do have another audience question. Lori, take it away.
Yeah, and Veronica, this is something that really people are asking us, and also courts may be asking. What is a fair punishment for these types of accusations, and how is that determined?
There is no standard for the punishment. Once you make a complaint of harassment, the employer has an obligation to see that they take, it's called prompt remedial action. And as long as they take some sort of action that puts an end to the harassment, they've done their job. It could be firing the guy, or it could be sending him to extra training. It could be just a write-up, if that's going to accomplish something. Usually if it's that type of situation where it's the flirting, the person didn't realize that he was being offensive, just a write-up is usually appropriate, because that usually takes care of it. At that point, they're put on notice. Look, you've got to stop doing this. If you do it, you're going to be fired. Somebody who is grabbing somebody in the workplace or committing sexual assault in the workplace, if I have an employer call me and ask me what to do, I'd say, I don't care how valuable that employee is, you got to get rid of them.
And Sarah, in your experience in talking to women, you feel that in many cases women just don't feel like they have the proper avenues to feel comfortable enough to come forward, or victims in general?
Right, there's two things. One is their own personal empowerment, and it has to start there with your own body language, the way you present yourself, the way you use your voice, assert your rights, claim your space. And so a predator will know, okay, this person's not, you know, present, or they know that they can take advantage of something. The same thing with a rapist. A rapist will not go after someone who knows how to hold their body and their space and who are present. They're going to be harder to take down. So someone who's personally empowered, they know the predator is not going to be able to push those buttons as easily because they know that they will say something or take it to the next level. So we have to start first personally, and then that goes into the workforce professionally.
I have a question for Jennifer, going back to the issue of politics and sexual harassment. You know, we read this New York Times op-ed this week about a woman who brings up some interesting points about how the movement may have some unintended consequences for women trying to advance in the workplace. What did you think of that, and how does it affect you personally? Do you think there are some adverse effects to the empowerment movement?
Two parts. First part, answer to your question, I thought it was very well written, and it really hit the side of things, not saying that someone who's accused an individual of inappropriate behavior is not telling the truth. It just simply said, have we taken the pendulum too far one way? Me personally, I can tell you that since all of this has been going on, again, as a female, I have a male colleague with me or another female colleague with me. We've heard of legislators who we've known for years that are saying, I'm just not going to have meetings with female staff or lobbyists or other legislators alone. I'm not going to shut the door. I'm not going to do that. And it's unfortunate that that's what's on minds of folks that are policymakers and making huge decisions, for the rest of the state of Florida. That's the first thing they're thinking of versus the state budget or something else. So hopefully that will resolve itself, but it's an odd feeling.
All right, Jennifer, thank you so much. All of you bringing great insight to this conversation. So when we come back, right after this break, we're going to take a look at the role of the EEOC in these investigations. You've already heard the agency being discussed here before about what happens if you need to file a claim and what is that process like. We'll tell you when we return.